also, Pat is joining from another location tonight. He is joining from his home. Apparently, St. Mary's is having some type of winter storm, which ended up not being as serious, but as precaution, he stayed at home. Oh, with the guitar. um, and so his internet, as we know, is not as smooth as the St. Mary's internet. So at any time, obviously, if you have a question, you can interrupt at any time. But if you're finding that he's breaking up or you're missing information, just feel free to jump right in and ask him to repeat. And also, my internet's been kind of wonky lately since the winter storm came through. So feel free to interrupt me as well if I'm being a little wonky. That's it. He's going to do a brief introduction and basic, and then what we're going to do is then break up into small groups and have some discussion. Did that come all through? Because I just got an internet is unstable notification on my Zoom. Everybody good?
Oh, I got enough to be okay. Are you guys okay? Okay. Okay, good to go?
Ahead.
All right. Here's the game plan. What I want to do is talk about the roots, the causes of partisan polarization, and then identify then the general things that need to change if you're going to reduce partisan polarization. And then I'm going to go through the particular proposals that got posted pretty quickly, just to give you guys more time to beat them up and come up with ideas of your own. Okay. So the things that got partisan polarization started, the roots are historically relatively, some of them are relatively distant, and we've been talking about some of them for quite some time, actually. And the first is sort of general decline in the Republican elements of our formal and informal constitutions. And I'm sorry, I just keep going back to the same well all the time as an illustration, moving from indirect election of senators to direct election of senators, but also that's for the formal constitution. If you think the informal constitution, one example of that we've hit a number of times and will show up in the proposals was when you shifted from caucuses to primaries, where caucuses you had elites who sort of ran the process, to primaries where ordinary voters. So you're moving from a more Republican kind of arrangement to a more Democratic arrangement. The second thing has been the increasing cynicism and distrust of our political institutions. And think about political institutions broadly. Okay, just any kind of political institution. It doesn't have to be part of the government. Although those are certainly the prime ones. And think about that conjoined with, it's not as though people got more ignorant. They just remained just as ignorant about politics as they always were. But what I want you to see is there's an interaction effect between those two things. Okay. The combination of increased levels of cynicism and distrust, along with that existing level of political ignorance, that makes the situation much worse. Okay. And then finally, the response on the elite level, and that is candidates and media and social media capitalizing, and lots of times monetizing, on those changes. And that means, since you move from Republican to Democratic, you're making much more emotional appeals. If there's nothing cognitive going on the part of ordinary citizens, and you need ordinary citizens for votes or viewers or likes okay? Then you hit them where they live. You are going to be more effective if you engage in those kinds of emotional appeals. Okay, so far so good? Okay. Specifically, certainly Watergate was a watershed in terms of increasing levels of cynicism and distrust. The next thing, well, it's actually before that, but around the same time, the McGovern-Fraser Commission that we've talked about before, which was the plan that shifted first the Democratic Party and then the Republican Party from caucuses with unpledged delegates that could be used in bargaining by party bosses to primaries with pledged delegates, where ordinary citizens really made that decision. The second thing was a series of Republican presidents, and that's Ronald Reagan, W, and Trump. And there are obviously differences there, but if we just take Reagan and W, these are folks whom I think I mentioned the Rosenthal's DW nominate scoring of ideology, where you could measure the ideology. They first applied it to Congress and then found a way to apply it to presidents. Reagan and W really departed from where the Republican Party had been and moved in a more right-wing direction. You don't have Democratic presidents during this period of time who are all that liberal, okay? But you do have those two Republican presidents moving the Republican Party farther to the right. With Trump, it's similar, but it's more personalized. In a sense, it's not ideology, and you know, they haven't constructed the scores for Trump yet. But his kind of leadership certainly fed into this process. The next thing has been, and this is, I'm going to tie this to Reagan as well, and that's the increased political clout and engagement of fundamentalist Protestant organizations that pushed morality issues. Get the connection to the emotional stuff? Really pushed morality issues onto the forefront where they hadn't had that prominent a role prior to that time. In part because those religious bodies eschewed engagement in politics because they were worried that they might face discrimination. You know, it was best to just stay out of politics, and then Ronald Reagan brought him in. The next thing, the decline of professional journalism and the rise of cable TV. And that's also kind of connected to the end of the fairness doctrine. The next one, which is Anne's favorite, is the decline of social capital, and that's the connectedness between ordinary citizens, you know, it's a well-known book, Bowling Alone, that talks about the decline of social capital in the United States, but in other places, but focusing on the United States. I should probably explain that a little bit. The reason he calls it Bowling Alone was that it used to be the case that people bowled in leagues. You didn't go by yourself, and you didn't go just on a day. You bowl in leagues. My next door neighbor in San Diego, that was her social life. She bowled in, I think, like 2 or 3 leagues, and a number of mornings each week, she would go in and bowl, but it was really more that she had friends there. She was connected on that level. those bowling leagues declined dramatically. People didn't do that anymore. They just went by themselves, or you know, went with a friend, but it wasn't the same kind of thing. And it's Robert Putnam is the author, and he does a much more thorough. I'm just giving you a little snapshot. The next thing, and it's kind of tied to the business about fairness doctrine, the growth of it's a different channel, the growth of unregulated social media. We've beaten that dog plenty of times, so we're not going to do it anymore. And then finally, the Tea Party. Okay. I'm going to do a quick, you're muted.
I'm like, that's it? You're just going to leave it there? Just and the Tea Party and move on?
I already hit the Tea Party. You know what I think of those clowns. There are a couple of things that and Michelle and I were talking about this before we got started, that make me sad right now, and that's that things aren't looking good right now for addressing any of this stuff. So there's no real indication that Mitch McConnell is going to develop a soul in the near future. He's going to continue to be obstructionist. That will, and we've talked about this before, that has the potential to really drive those younger progressives that are just coming into Congress, to really drive them off the deep end, where they're, you know, it's like, we can't deal with those people at all. The heck with them. We're just going to push as far to the left as we possibly can. Well, that's not going to help you in terms of partisan polarization. And then, you know, right now, Kevin McCarthy's utter spinelessness in failing to deal with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And she's not the only one. I mean, there's her, there's Boebert, and he seems to simply want the title of leader rather than to actually do it. And both of those things have the potential to do the opposite of what, you know, I'm trying to talk about tonight. So, in general terms, these are the things that I think need to be done. You need to change elites' behavior, particularly the president, because the president can drive so much of what's going on right now. Okay? One of two ways, either through the selection process. In other words, you get different kinds of people in the White House than you had in the past. We've certainly changed the selection process, and we've gotten someone like Donald Trump, who never could have been elected before those party reforms. There's no way on God's green earth he could have been elected. He couldn't have been nominated. He was going nowhere. No party organization that ever existed in the United States when it had nomination power would have selected him, okay? As my dissertation advisor put it in an article he did, changing the rules changes the game and changes the outcome. The second way you can change their behavior is through changing elements of the environment within which they operate. That's on the elite level. And you need to change things on the mass public's level as well. You need to change things about the mass public in terms of those matters that I discussed earlier. And part of that is through changing their environment. and that'll have to do with their information environment, whether it's through the media, social media. Okay. All good? All right. I'm going to run like crazy through the proposals. The first general category had to do with beginning the process of regulating social media. That you can already see there's benefit. I mean, it was too little too late that they finally kicked Trump's butt off Facebook and Twitter and all the, and they're getting rid of a number of the sort of wild conspiracy, racist, neo-Nazi sites and folks who were there. Our government has not done anything to really push toward regulating that environment. The EU is ahead of us, and the EU has been moving to put pressure on media companies like Facebook and Twitter and so on to make a number of changes. And I listed 4 of those there, and that's regulating violent content, threatening content, hate speech. And I added one just because I think it matters. And this one was kind of for you too, Anne. And it's reducing anonymity. It's always easier to be a horrible human being if they don't know it's you. Okay. The fairness doctrine, it's unclear exactly how that's going to get implemented now, because it was first done away with before you had cable TV. But the fairness doctrine essentially made sure it was kind of a disincentive to the networks and to local stations to air wildly partisan or ideological messages, because they were required to have balanced content. That was the fairness doctrine in short. I mean, you can do a little more, but if you could do something like that, and radio stations is where you had the biggest impact anyway. And you continue to have wildly crazy right-wing content on the radio. And so reintroducing the fairness doctrine, thinking about tailoring it to the new media environment that exists because of new technologies. Next, increasing, as opposed to what the Democrats did in response to crazy Bernie, increase the role of superdelegates at nominating conventions, increase their number, increase their role, so that they play a larger role shaping the platform rather than the nominee gets to like run the show. Right now, because the superdelegates in the party organization really don't play a role at all in selecting the nominee, they don't believe they need to do anything to respond to the party as an organization. Party as an organization served as a kind of anchor to keep the party from going off into crazy directions. It provided continuity across administrations, relative continuity. And include party organization officials among the superdelegates. You want party organization officials and elected party officials both. This is to foster more communication, contact, interdependence between those elements of the party. Okay? It's designed to make everybody more responsible. The next one is the anti-Kevin McCarthy proposal, stronger congressional party leadership so that you can discipline extremist factions. Put tools in the hands of the majority leaders, the speaker in the House, minority leader in the House, majority and minority leaders in the Senate. Give them the power to discipline characters like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. I don't have specific things there, but the more power you put in their hands, the better. And the filibuster, part of what got me to put it down there was it's one of those elements that's tied to slavery. So I'm not really a fan of it anyway. And it does have, I talked about the potential impact that McConnell's obstructionism can have on progressive folks. He can only do that because of the filibuster. Okay, so I think in that way, ending the filibuster would decrease the ability of the minority to just be obstructionist. The last thing is place redistricting power in the hands of independent commissions. And that's already been done in a number of states. I got to tell you, it's largely been Democratic states, but there is the oddity of Arizona, which is becoming a more competitive state. But Arizona's experience is really instructive in that they've drawn more competitive districts, and those more competitive districts have raised turnout and diminished the amount of extremism on the part of candidates who are there. Here's the exciting thing, St. Mary's folks. That's something that's being done in Indiana. And my buddy, my wife suggested that I volunteer to serve on the commission, and I reminded her I'm retired. But a friend of mine, a good friend of mine who's a young dude in the math department, he and I ran a 1-credit course on mathematics and voting. And he's on the commission for the state of Indiana. So you have a St. Mary's faculty member who's on the redistricting commission for the state of Indiana, which is really, really cool. And finally, if you just put Trump in prison, that's a great short-term measure. You can't deny that. There's no, just getting him off social media had a positive impact. Think of the wonderfulness if he was in jail. All right. Those are all relatively short-term proposals. I'm not pretending they're easy. And then there are long-term proposals, and that's improving civic education. I'm going to tell you the APSA has been trying to do work on that for years and years. You guys probably don't remember, but I really understood that for most students coming out of high school and they're just coming into college, that they had horrible high school government classes. There were exceptions, but it's been like the retaining pool for assistant football coaches. You didn't get folks who really were engaged with the stuff. This was just one of their responsibilities, and they were on the coaching staff. And to reform the curriculum so that it's more engaging, so that it's not that typical civics class.
Hey, Pat.
That it's more Uh-huh.
Pat, yeah, I just wanted to comment on that because, I have kids who just finished high school. And I think, they had the opportunity to take AP classes, like AP government and things like that. And I mean, I have to say, very high quality. Probably they learned things that I learned in college, in high school for AP. But the problem is,
Yeah,
those are the AP students, right? They're
right.
not all the other students. So, I think in contrast to say like when I was in high school, I think there are students who can get that higher level, but we're not reaching enough of the kids. So just wanted to make that comment.
And yeah, cool. And so let me clarify what I have in mind there. To a great extent, I'm not talking about the substance that they learn. I'm really talking about getting them to be engaged in politics generally, to find it as something that's important, something that's interesting to study, that really engages you. That's what I'm looking for. If you can increase engagement, okay, that engagement means at whatever point of their life, they're going to want to know those things. I mean, there's a finding that was out there that in terms of political knowledge, kids when they're graduating high school, they have higher levels of knowledge than they have later on in life, because the knowledge is just factual stuff. So you got it drummed into you when you were in that high school class. You got it drummed into you. You took your test, and then you forgot it because you didn't care. It was just you took the test. I'm done with this. You toss it to the side, and you don't worry about it anymore. That's the civic education that I have in mind has to be more engaging. It's got to be more lively. It needs to be more participatory. That's what I've got in mind there. It doesn't have to be. I'm trying to think who did this. Now I can't remember who used this term, but it's the River Platte knowledge, where you have a mile wide and no depth to it. You don't need to cover a whole bunch of stuff. What you do it in enough depth that it really gets them connected. Okay. We need more folks to have access to college, not for the reasons that every dimwit talks about the importance of a college education. It's not for a job. I know everybody needs a job. The political importance of college is that it introduces, as long as they're not just, doing that business major and then disregarding all the other classes that they're taking, or they're doing an engineering and they're disregarding everything else. As long as they get a broad kind of education that demands that they entertain different points of view and different ways of interpreting things, that's really valuable. In dealing with some of those kinds of problems that we see on the place of ordinary systems. And then the broader thing, and this is Anne's, Merry Christmas, Anne, and that's revitalize community institutions. And I mean this really, 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 really broadly. Every institution, group, organization in the community that you can find to make it stronger. Because those human contacts, social capital, make it much more difficult for people to hate one another, make it much more difficult for folks to vilify and demonize other people. Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. Yeah, I'll take any quick questions, but as soon as I can, I want to just let you guys run with this stuff and whatever ideas you happen to have.
Pat, on the first one with regulating social media, can you talk a little bit about your thoughts about Section 230, whether you think that applies or doesn't apply in your thinking around it? Does that make
Okay,
sense?
Section 230 is?
The communication, CDA is what I'm saying in my mind. The one that says that public or that social media companies are considered publishing versus platform, and whether or not they can censor versus censor, I'm putting in air quotes, or not. If they censor, then the Republicans are saying, well, they're no longer a platform, they're publishing, so they're considered under the regulations and vice versa. Like Communications Decency Act is what I want to say. CDA, something like that. Good. I get it. Adrian's giving me a heads up or thumbs up.
Yeah.
You know anything on that end? I just read a lot.
Not on that level of detail, but in a sense, no matter.
Ooh, nice.
I just want folks to find a way to do it.
Oh, okay.
And
nitty-gritty.
And that may entail doing something about that piece of legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Let me put it this way. It's much better, I believe, it's much better if the government does this than if we leave it in the hands of Zuckerberg. If you wait for those individuals that own and run those corporations to make decisions about when they're going to censor and when they're not going to censor, that's worse. That's worse. And they will then be subjected to political pressure in a much less systematic way. And I've been through this before. It's always conservative Republicans who claim bias, who claim that that's going on, even when it isn't, okay? There's no objectivity to that at all. So you're going to get the complaints anytime. If Zuckerberg has to worry that if he takes Trump off, conservative Republicans are going to come after him, it makes him less likely to take him off, no matter how heinous the things are that Trump puts up there. Okay? So then it's this biased and erratic political pressure that's going to bounce content all over the place, and it's going to bounce effectively the guidelines all over the place. It's much better to have something systematic, public, that establishes guidelines for content and how, and legally, how, whatever. Look, you already know a major obstacle to doing a number of these things is the current Supreme Court. They're going to make it much more difficult to do a number of these things, and that would be one of them.
Pat, I thought this class was going to be a bit more uplifting. I feel like I got lied to.
Thank you, Maria. I completely agree. I'm like,
It was uplifting until the end, I thought.
well, and then I'm
the
thinking in
end.
my head, like, even some of this stuff that might be great, like, where's the path to get there from where we are now? And that's that's a whole different conversation.
I think that you look, there's no one thing that's going to do it, right? It's going to be a whole bunch of things, and it's not as though you can choreograph this stuff. So you pick the stuff that you can do. It's like Like, if I could put Trump in prison, okay, I don't really care about the other stuff. I'll get his butt in there right away, you know, and we can take care of the other stuff at a later point in time. Okay, so it's really, I don't think you need to coordinate stuff. It's just you find the stuff where you can get some purchase on the problem, and you do it. And there's nothing wrong with taking like the easiest things first, get moving on that, and then move on to the things that are more difficult. You know, if there was a strategy, that'd be my strategy. Find the easy things to do, and do them, and then move on from that.
Well, I kind of think that was where I was thinking, because at the end of the day, all of this, for me, I go a half a step back, and I think I go straight to the filibuster idea or thought, because at the end of the day, all of this will require some type of bipartisan effort, or at least if we're going to use today's climate, some type of bipartisan effort. And as long as the filibuster exists, I think the filibuster is important. Obviously, it's not a constitutional, it's not in there, so we know that it can be removed. I think that it's important in some aspects, but if there's some way that could be structured to, you can only use it so many times, or if you're going to hold the floor, you hold the floor, you wear those adult diapers, you bring your gallons of water, you do, you know, like you hold the floor, you make them work for it, or you get punished if you use it, or you can only use it so many times, like some structure around it. I think, and then this is going into a conversation, but I think for me, where I keep going back to is like, oh, every time I try to think about one of these issues, I think, oh, well, we need to address the filibuster. Oh, we need to address the filibuster. So but for me in the list, I just put it right back up into number one.
Okay. Yeah, and I think Michelle is absolutely right. And you can think about that with all of these proposals. They're not black and white kinds of things. You could make a little bit of movement in that direction. Right, and that's essentially, you know, when Michelle was laying out, well, you know, you've actually got to be on, you've got to hold the floor. You got to stand up there for the, okay, well, let's tightening things up from where they are right now. At this point, if I'm a member of the Senate and I want to filibuster, I just send an email to Mitch. I don't have to be there. I just send an email, and you could at least make it harder. You can make it harder. You could make the size of the supermajority a little different, but at least some movement on these. It's going to be helpful.
There's obviously a correlation too, but we talked about this at the very beginning about money in politics, which we haven't really talked about today, that, you know, the rise of corporate giving and political action committees happen around the same time as partisan politics happen. And with the rise of with the passing of Citizens United, I think it's only made it worse to have that much money going into politics. Makes it more partisan by its very nature. So I think you have to solve the problem of Citizens United to get a handle on partisan politics too.
Yeah, as much as, you know, I hate Citizens United, and I hate every Supreme Court decision on campaign finance since Buckley versus Valeo. And that's in, I think, 1976. I don't know that that's nearly as central and key to partisan polarization as all these other things we've been talking about. It may exacerbate it a little bit, but and it certainly harms the body politic.
Yeah, Pat, like I think if you could actually get the states to have these independent groups to draw the districts,
Mm-hmm.
I think that could mitigate some of the negative impact of Citizens United, possibly.
Yeah.
only
Listen,
just one
I think that you guys are ready. I think you guys are ready to run with this stuff. And after Mary gave me crap for for being a downer, I can always count on her, kick me in the shorts. I'm going to go and I'll switch from this to something, more adult and let you guys run with this stuff. Does that sound good? I think that's where you're at. I think that's where folks are at is you're ready to talk about this stuff and play around with the proposals rather than bounce them off me.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Pat. We'll see you next week.
Ciao, guys. And I will, I'll get with Michelle and lay out what we've got in the next couple of weeks. It's what, 2 weeks until the first weekend that my daughter is free. I gave you the dates there. I think it's like 2 weeks. So maybe in a couple of weeks. What was the date?
February 20th, 21st, or March 6th and 7th. So yeah. 2
Okay,
weeks.
so it's like 2.5 weeks. Would be the first time that Rachel and I could do a thing on women candidates and women legislators, and we probably do those 2 dates. But Michelle and I get together to figure out stuff in the middle. And Odell?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Me,
Sounds good.
send me an email and just give me a time
Okay.
that you want to Zoom.
Okay, sounds good. I'll do it.
Okay. Ciao, guys.
Night.
Night.
Kick him off. There we go. Do I kick him off or does he leave? I don't know. So his design, so this is going to be recorded. He is going to get the recording of it. We can choose to turn off the recording, but he thought maybe if we had some like good nuggets, yeah, Ann's like, take us off recording maybe. He said if we had some good nuggets that he could put that on the recording for the YouTube, or we could just summarize for him at a later date kind of what we talked about. So I guess thumbs up if you want to turn off the recording, and I will. No one cares really. And sort of, yes, you want it. How about this? Let's talk, and then I'll turn back on the recording when we go to summarize. So we'll compromise. Okay, hold on. Stop recording.